Good evening. I want to start tonight with a simple question. When a government has to make difficult choices about money, who gets protected and who gets the bill? Not a complicated question, not an economic question, just a human one. And by the end of tonight, I think you will have a very clear answer. If this is the kind of honest conversation you value, subscribe now. Because these are the things Westminster hopes you are too busy to notice.
Do MPs deserve a 5% pay rise? Well, it looks like they're going to get one. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, IPSA, said their salary will rise to £98,599 a year from April.
Let us start with what happened to members of Parliament this April. Every single one of them received a pay rise, above inflation. While most working people in this country received pay rises that did not keep up with the cost of living, meaning they earned more money but could afford less with it, MPs received more than inflation. In real terms, they got richer, while most of the country got poorer. That is not an accusation, that is arithmetic. Now, let us talk about what happened to everyone else, because the pay rise is not the story. The pay rise is the contrast.
But today I am making the difficult decision that those not in receipt of pension credit or certain other means-tested benefits will no longer receive the winter fuel payment from this year onwards.
Cast your mind back to the summer of 2024. One of the very first decisions made by the new Labour government, a government elected on a promise of change, was to remove the winter fuel payment from 10 million pensioners. 10 million elderly people who had received a few £100s every year, specifically to help heat their homes through the winter. Gone, without warning. It was not in their manifesto. Nobody voted for it. One day it was there, the next it was not.
I mean, they always seem to hit the pensioners, don't they? You know, I used to have it on 22, but I have it on 19 now, and it's a big difference. Put your coat on, put your card on. We're going back to the 1930s. No.
So what would you say to Keir Starmer?
And we swear.
Think about what that means for a single person living alone. Perhaps your mother. Perhaps your neighbour. Perhaps the woman 2 doors down who has lived in the same house for 40 years, who raised her children there, who paid into the system her entire working life. Someone who is not wealthy, but is just about managing. A few £100s does not sound like much in Westminster, but for someone on a fixed pension, that money is the difference between keeping the heating on in January and sitting in a coat indoors and hoping the pipes do not freeze. Age UK warned that as many as 2 million pensioners could struggle to heat their homes as a result. 2 million people who did exactly what they were asked to do, who worked, who contributed, who saved, who played by the rules, now facing a winter they cannot afford to heat their way through. And the reason given? We needed to save money. The system had to be sustainable. Difficult decisions had to be made. Then came the next decision. Disabled people.
In future, extra financial support for health conditions in universal credit will be available solely through the PIP assessment. So extra income is based on the impact of someone's health condition or disability, not on their capacity to work.
The government announced plans to cut financial support for hundreds of thousands of people who rely on personal independence payment. Money specifically designed to cover the extra costs that come with a long-term condition. Not luxury costs. The cost of getting to a hospital appointment when you cannot drive and cannot walk to the bus stop. The cost of simply getting through a day that most of us take entirely for granted. The government's own committee of MPs called the plans discriminatory, called them likely to push people with long-term conditions deeper into poverty. And then every single Labour member of that committee voted for them anyway. So, let us hold these things together for a moment. Pensioners had their heating money taken. People with long-term conditions face cuts to the support that allows them to live independently. Ordinary workers are earning more but buying less, and members of Parliament received a pay rise above inflation, on a salary that is already more than double what most people in this country earn. with a plan to keep increasing it for the next 3 years. I'm not going to tell you what to call that. You already know. Now, I want to bring in something the government would rather you did not dwell on, because while it was telling 10 million pensioners there was no money for their heating, it was spending rather freely in other areas. Since taking office, the Prime Minister has undertaken nearly 40 overseas trips. The total bill to the taxpayer, confirmed by official government transparency figures, now exceeds £4 million. In the final 3 months of last year alone, 8 separate trips cost £1.4 million. A single 3-day visit to a climate summit in Brazil, with 29 officials in the delegation, cost over £400,000. £400,000 for 3 days, at a conference about saving money on energy. The same Prime Minister who stood at the dispatch box and told this country that removing the winter fuel payment from 10 million elderly people was a difficult but necessary decision, flew to Brazil with 29 officials and charged the public purse £400,000 for the privilege. I am not saying diplomatic travel is wrong. Prime Ministers travel. That is part of the role. But there is a word for spending freely on yourself while telling others there is nothing left for them. And the British public, particularly those who remember what it means to manage on a fixed income, know exactly what that word is. There is something else worth knowing. The same government that told 10 million pensioners there was no money for their heating bills has spent, since 2019, £15 billion housing asylum seekers in hotels. Not in homes, not in purpose-built accommodation, in hotels, run by 3 private contractors who have earned hundreds of millions from the arrangement. The Home Office's own figures confirm the daily cost is nearly £6 million, every single day, while 1.3 million British families sit on the waiting list for social housing, some of them waiting for years. The money was not gone. It simply went somewhere else. And the people who decided where it went received a pay rise above inflation this April. Now, let me be genuinely fair, because fairness matters. MPs do not vote on their own salaries. An independent body sets the amount. The welfare system genuinely does face serious long-term financial pressures, and the asylum accommodation system is a consequence of a backlog that has built up over many years under governments of both parties. These are not invented problems. Yes, all of that is true. But here is what none of those explanations tells you. They do not explain why, when the difficult decisions had to be made, it was always the same people chosen to bear them. The pensioner sitting in the cold house. The person who cannot get through a day without financial support. The family on the waiting list who has been waiting for years. Why is it always them? And why is it never the person with the grace and favour home, the expense account, and the inflation-beating salary? There is a pattern here that goes back 15 years and crosses party lines. Every government in that time has arrived in office promising to protect the most vulnerable. Every government has left, having found that the most vulnerable are always the ones most available to absorb the cost of whatever needs to be cut. Conservative governments, Labour governments, different faces, different slogans, the same direction of travel. Downward, for the people who need the state most. And upward, quietly, reliably, every single year, for the people who run it. Let me leave you with one image. Not a statistic, just a picture. A nurse, working a 12-hour night shift on a ward, driving home at 7 in the morning. She received a pay rise this year, but it did not keep up with inflation. So in real terms, she is worse off than she was last year. Her patient, an elderly woman on a pension who spent 40 years paying taxes and national insurance, who never asked for anything she had not earned, lost her winter fuel payment this winter. She keeps the heating off as long as she can. She has a blanket she keeps on the sofa now. And the MP who voted for that decision, who sat in the chamber and put their hand up, is on a salary heading toward £110,000 a year, with a pension that most people in this country will never see. I am not asking you to be angry. Anger is easy and it passes. I am asking you to remember, because the one thing this political class relies on, more than spin, more than statistics, more than any policy announcement, is that you will forget by the next news cycle. The question is not whether this is fair. You already know the answer to that. And so do they. Let me know what you think below. And if this is the kind of conversation Britain needs to be having, subscribe, because we are just getting started.